Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Dan and Joe Sports Show. As always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.
And Joe, we just got off of probably maybe our most hyped or lit show you can ever say we ever had, where we're talking about Ole Miss getting their first national championship in baseball after 22 years with Mike Bianco and going from first to worst to first to get the title. And now, as with life, they say that life is not fair, that fair is where you give a blue ribbon to a pig. And you know what? While we get to celebrate this amazing national championship in baseball, the Manning legacy at Ole Miss is not going to continue, at least not for now. Maybe there's an Archie kid or a Peyton kid who can do it, but Cooper's kid is not going to be an Ole Miss Rebel. He is now committed to Texas. And Joe, I know a lot of us had thought for a while he wasn't going to go to Ole Miss, but my thought was I thought it was a done deal that he was going to be a Georgia Bulldog.
Yeah, I kept hearing kind of the trio of Georgia, Alabama, and Texas. It was always kind of hard for me to pinpoint exactly who the favorite was. And I also wasn't sure exactly when he was going to commit. I kept thinking it might be closer to like July or August, but I did think it would be before the season started for high school football. So not too much of a shock. The thing, though, I thought about on Thursday was it came on the heels of Ole Miss baseball suffering that devastating loss on Wednesday night to Arkansas. And so you hear about the commitment of Arch Manning to Texas like early Thursday afternoon. And I was like, this is going to be one of the more depressing days in Ole Miss history because not only will he probably commit to Texas, but then you'll have Ole Miss probably lose to Arkansas. But then DeLucia, took care of that. But it still is something, that normally would have been the biggest Ole Miss story. And definitely kind of a surprise in the grand scheme of things that Texas got in. But it seems to be largely linked exclusively to the NIL deals.
Yeah, Joe, you think about it, like Arch had the greatest advisors ever on how to maximize your income, your image, what you're going to get right now than anyone else did. He's got three former people that played in the NFL in his family that know how to market themselves. And they looked at where this culture was and they said, listen, like, you're not going to play forever. You're great right now. You're fantastic. Maybe you're better than all of us. We don't know. But maybe a career-ending injury could happen. We don't want that to happen, but it could happen. And what you need to do is plan for right now. And the bottom line is you're good enough that if you don't get injured, you can be a first-round draft pick playing anywhere. So why not go ahead and maximize all the money you can get from this new NIL system that your granddaddy Archie never got to do, that your uncles Eli and Peyton never got to take advantage of, and make all this money right now because football is a fleeting thing. And if something happens, then at least you got yourself a good amount of money out of it while you could.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was a big motivating factor. I also think that, as far as kind of having his own legacy, he looked at his uncle Peyton, going to Tennessee. And so, the family eventually got over that. And so it's like, look, the Ole Miss family will eventually, kind of get over this. It's not the end of the world. You can still see what he did and have potentially a great career at Texas and at the NFL. And I think he also kind of wanted his own identity at Texas. And then also with Texas joining the SEC probably in a couple of years, whenever it happens. And then also with him having the opportunity to kind of put Texas back on the map.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think about it. I know you and I had talked about this before the show. You think maybe one of the things that led him away from Kirby and the Georgia program is the fact that Georgia finally broke through and won their first national championship since 1980. Now, Georgia's considered a blue blood. They're considered one of the teams that's going to win it every year. They're going to be top five for the foreseeable future going in football. And Texas right now, meanwhile, is at probably its lowest point in its history. I mean, you think about it, the last time they won a national championship was 2006 with Vince Young. They made that championship game in 2009 against Alabama. But you kind of feel like ever since Colt McCoy got injured in that game against Alabama, Texas has just gone further and further downhill with like no bright light in sight. And it's the richest athletic department in the country. It's one that really cares about football. It's got the best high school football in America. And Arch Manning could be the hero that actually brings Texas back. Because right now, Texas's back has become a really degrading punchline.
Mm-hmm. It's just also like the success and notoriety of the other in-state rivals. Baylor having such a good season last year. Think about A&M with having Heisman Trophy winners like Manziel. They just kind of had a battle for even in-state supremacy. And like you said, they've been kind of the punchline for a lot of jokes. I think that getting Arch Manning, while they haven't rewritten that narrative yet, but that's just a huge step for Sarkisian, coming off of last season.
Absolutely. I mean, he started out last season on gangbusters. Like, they beat a really good Louisiana Lafayette program badly, and a team, as a top 20 team that a lot of people thought Texas wouldn't beat. They were looking good. They were beating up on people, and all of a sudden they played Arkansas, and Arkansas just wiped the floor with them. And then, okay, that happens. But then they play Oklahoma, and they've got Oklahoma dead to rights with them beating them by 28 points. And as soon as Oklahoma and Caleb Williams had that epic comeback against them, they just fell apart and they didn't even make a bowl game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just an utter collapse there. And so for them to get Arch Manning, on the cusp of what happened last year, I'm glad you articulated that, because that's what really kind of makes it even crazier to think about. It's not like they had some type of building block 9-3 or 8-4 season. I mean, they were horrendous last year.
Yeah, it's not like they had a year where maybe they beat Oklahoma, they beat Baylor, maybe they went 10-2 and played in the Cotton Bowl or something like that. It wasn't that kind of season. It was a season where not only did they not play in a bowl game, they lost to Kansas in football, not in basketball, in football. Just what an embarrassing loss that is. And they come off this, and now you get Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning in the same recruiting class, essentially, in the same recruiting calendar year. And you got to wonder what Quinn Ewers is thinking right now. He just signed this huge deal. That's an NIL deal that got him to transfer from Ohio State down to Texas. And it's going to be fascinating to see what kind of year he has and whether he can hold on to this job or if he's already considering transferring, because he's already transferred once. I mean, do you think that Texas is even going to be able to hold on to him? I don't know at this point.
Well, I guess he would lose, or already would have lost his one-time free ticket, to not have to sit out a year. And so that'd be something, if you're him, you're pretty upset right now.
Right. I'm sure he's quite upset with Sarkisian and the entire Texas coaching staff, because I'm sure that when they signed him to that big deal and got him away from Ohio State, they promised him the world. They promised he was going to be the face of Longhorn football moving forward. And now suddenly you're thinking he has 1 year to show what he can do, but he better go out there and be a world beater, or else he ain't going to get to play the next year.
Yeah, like a Manning, having the name recognition, it's gonna be hard to hold him on the sidelines. People are just gonna be wanting him out there.
I mean, you got to think that. I mean, Sarkisian is obviously a very good offensive coach. He also hadn't had a great year so far. His first year wasn't good. Unless they have a lot better year next year, he's not going to have a lot of coaching chips where he can afford to not start a Manning.
Mm-hmm. And he's still trying to prove himself, as a head coach too. Even going back to his Washington days, it's always been kind of shaky.
I mean, you and I've always talked about that, but the guy's been given the keys to the castle of all these mega programs and has never done anything with them. And we don't know how he keeps getting all the keys to these Ferraris.
Yeah, I mean, great offensive mind, like you said. Great to have as a coordinator, but just trusting him with the driving the vehicle is different.
That's right, Joe. Well, speaking of having keys to a Ferrari, it didn't end well for Coach Pearl in Auburn basketball this year, but he certainly had some Ferrari players in Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler. And he definitely has used what they did last season, both being first-team All-Americans, and now being two guys that got drafted in the first round of the NBA draft, to further increase the Auburn basketball brand and make it a much more relevant recruiting territory and putting themselves on notice. I think Auburn basketball is going to be a top 10 recruiting team year in, year out, because look at this player development. And while Jabari Smith ended up not going number 1 overall, he still goes number 3 overall and becomes the highest drafted Auburn player ever.
Yeah, I mean, it was big, to have that notoriety on draft night, and then having Kessler also go in the first round. And, Smith was a guy that was talked about, pretty much as a guy that could go number 1 for a while. I was really kind of surprised how it changed on draft night. Like I was pretty much expecting the Magic were going to take him. There's a part of me that's also a little bit surprised the Thunder didn't take him at number 2. However, all along they kind of indicated that Holmgren was their guy. I don't know if they'll go, live to regret that at some point or not, but definitely feel like Houston had to have been very, content that he fell to them.
Yeah, I feel like Houston's got to be shocked that they were able to get someone like him at number 3. You and I talked about this many times on the show, the comparison between Paulo Banchero and Jabari Smith. And I said, even though I'm a huge Auburn fan, I've always thought that Banchero was a little bit of a better player, and that I thought he was a better shooter. I thought that he performed better in games that mattered. I felt like Jabari Smith was very good, but he put on these performances that were just incredible against teams like Vanderbilt, where it didn't really matter. And meanwhile, Banchero, I never saw a big game where he was the reason they lost. And I did see it a couple times with Jabari Smith, most notably when him and Walker Kessler both played bad against Miami. And then, there was also the Texas A&M game in the SEC tournament, which I think was probably what kept Auburn from being a 1 seed. And those were times when Jabari Smith didn't play his best. And, I think about it, if you have maybe a coin flip between players, I think I'm probably going to choose the player that did better in the bigger games.
Yes. And there's something too about Banchero's personality where I feel like there's a little bit more of a confidence there with him too, where he's like ready to step in kind of like as the number 1 overall pick. Whereas Smith, immensely talented, but I see a little bit more of a reserved personality.
Yeah, and I think that the Smith is someone who could very easily end up having maybe a better career in the NBA than Paulo Banchero is. But I feel like at least in the short term, the Banchero is probably a little bit of a safer pick. But I think that what you're going to see is that this is going to be a very good motivating thing for Jabari Smith. He might ultimately be a greater, all-star in the NBA because he got picked number 3 than if he had been number 1. I mean, think about people that didn't get chosen number 1, like Michael Jordan, that used that to, kind of propagate their career the whole time and motivate them.
Yeah, I mean, he went number 3 as well, similar to Smith. You think about, Kevin Durant going number 2. I mean, there's been a lot of players that have, not been number 1 that turned out great. And weirdly, in most drafts, you don't see the first 2 or 3 players all good. Like usually there's always that one bust.
Right. And I mean, in my mind, I would think if there was going to be one bust of the top 3, it'd probably end up being Chet Holmgren. I feel like Holmgren's good, but I kind of feel like he's not quite bulky enough. I feel like maybe he's not going to be tough enough. And when I saw him play defenses like that Arkansas defense, I don't think he really showed the kind of toughness I would want with the number 2 overall pick.
Yeah, and another thing I'm concerned about with him is his 3-point shooting. To me, is not so far as prolific as I feel like it needs to be. There's been some people saying he could be a shooter like a Kevin Durant, but I just don't see like the efficiency. I saw him at Gonzaga almost play more like just a shot blocker and rebounder, and I didn't see the scoring prowess of his teammate Drew Timme. And so that's where I kind of want to see him step up with Oklahoma City. But they must really like him to take him at number 2. The other player I'm a little bit concerned about, though, anytime the Sacramento Kings take a player in the top 5, always concerned about that. And Keegan Murray, number 4, I'm not sold on that out of Iowa.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, why wouldn't you go Jaden Ivey at number 4? I thought Ivey was a really solid player who's going to be a great NBA player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe if he said he just didn't want to go to Sacramento, but that definitely kind of surprised me too.
Well, Joe, talking about Walker Kessler, that's a guy who he gets there at 22nd and gets drafted by the Grizzlies and immediately traded to the T-Wolves. And he's a guy that is an amazing defensive player. The question you have with Kessler is he going to get the offensive prowess to be worthy of a first-round draft pick? He can sit in there, and he was the NCAA leader in block shots, play great defense. Of course, for a big guy that's 7'1", his free throw shooting is not great, and he doesn't have, really a great ability to shoot outside. And he also misses a lot of the shots inside that are easy. The question is he going to be a guy that's going to be getting you 10 block shots a game, but can he also get you 10 plus points a game? That's the question I don't know about him right now.
Well, one thing I do think that helps him is the situation in Minnesota. While this has been a franchise that has struggled to be consistent going to the playoffs and be that good, they have guys that can score on the roster. You've got Karl Anthony Towns, and you've also got Anthony Edwards, who's one of the better young scorers in the league. And so I don't think he'll have to score as much as some of these other first-round picks. You know, they're like drafted in the top 10 that are pretty much going to have to be the guy from day one.
Yeah. And, you know, something else that he can do, too, is if he never develops that next level scoring ability, he can still be an all-star. He's got such a great defensive ability. Maybe he could be the next Ben Wallace.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the roster he's going to will complement what he does well pretty good. And if he can add some scoring prowess, that'll just make him more dangerous.
That's right. But, you know, moving forward, you look at it, I think, you know, Auburn brought in some good recruits last year with Trey Orr and, of course, getting the transfer from Morehead State. But I got to think that Bruce Pearl being there, getting 2 first-round draft picks, having Auburn University being advertised in Times Square for basketball, I definitely think that the sky's the limit in what Bruce Pearl is going to be able to do with recruiting in the future.
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely big for the program. We saw it, you know, on TV. The atmosphere, you know, in the arena is just outstanding as well.
That's right. Great times for Auburn basketball and for Ole Miss baseball right now. And when we come back next week, we're going to go back to the pro sports world to look at it a little bit now that we got Omaha done. I want to thank all of our listeners. Safe travels for everyone coming back from Omaha to Mississippi or wherever you are in the Southeast. And you can check out all of our other shows on Spotify. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch our videos on there. You can also like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at DJ Sports Show. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.